There comes a moment in every person's life when they must ask a difficult question. If no one applauded you, would you still pursue the life you secretly desire? If nobody noticed your progress, would you still keep going? If no one praised your sacrifice, would you still make it? Because much of what we call ambition is sometimes a hidden search for approval. We work to be admired. We succeed to be recognized. We change ourselves to become acceptable. We chase goals that look impressive from the outside, while something inside us quietly asks, "But is this truly what I want?" There is a deeper kind of transformation that begins when you stop living as a performance for other people. You begin to understand that your life cannot be built entirely around the expectations of others. You do not need everyone to understand your journey. You do not need everyone to believe in you. You do not need applause before you take the next step. There are things you must do simply because they matter to you. Become disciplined because you respect your future. Heal because you deserve peace. Build because you know there is more within you. Walk away because you refuse to betray yourself. And keep going even when nobody is watching. Because the person you are becoming is the person who will have to live with your choices long after the applause disappears. There is a subtle prison that many people never recognize because it does not have walls. It is the need to be approved of. You may wake up each morning believing that you are making your own decisions, yet somewhere beneath your conscious thoughts, you may still be asking a silent question. What will they think of me? That question can shape an entire life. It can determine what career you choose, what clothes you wear, what relationships you maintain, what dreams you pursue, what opinions you express, and even how much of yourself you allow the world to see. You may call it ambition. You may call it responsibility. You may call it being a good person. But sometimes it is simply the fear of disappointing others. And the more you organize your life around approval, the further you can move away from yourself. You begin becoming a version of yourself designed for observation. A version that knows how to appear successful. A version that knows how to appear happy. A version that knows how to say the right things. A version that knows how to make other people comfortable. Community. But somewhere underneath that carefully constructed identity, there may be another voice asking, "What about me? What do I actually want? What kind of person do I want to become? What would I pursue if nobody could see me? What would I change if I knew nobody would judge me?" These questions can be uncomfortable because they expose the distance between the life you are living and the life you may actually desire. Human beings naturally seek belonging. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be accepted. We are social creatures. Conch matters. Recognition can feel meaningful. Praise can motivate us. The problem begins when approval becomes the foundation of your identity. When you need other people to tell you that you are valuable before you can believe it yourself. When you need applause before you trust your own work. When you need someone else to approve of your decision before you allow yourself to make it. When you constantly change yourself because you fear rejection. Then your life is no longer being directed from within. It is being directed from outside, and the outside world is unstable. People change their opinions. People become impressed and then bored. People praise you today and criticize you tomorrow. Someone can admire you for one quality, and reject you for another. If your identity depends upon their approval, your emotional state will rise and fall with every opinion. You become like a person standing before a crowd, constantly looking into their faces to determine whether you are allowed to continue. Imagine how exhausting that becomes. You accomplish something, but instead of experiencing it, you immediately wonder whether people noticed. You reach a goal, but the satisfaction disappears because someone else achieved something bigger. You make progress, but you compare your progress to another person's timeline. You create something meaningful, but you hesitate because you fear criticism. You want to pursue something unusual, but you abandon it because someone says it is unrealistic. Slowly, your life becomes a negotiation. You are constantly asking permission to become yourself. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is that the people whose approval you are chasing may not even be thinking about you as much as you imagine. They are busy with their own fears, their own ambitions, their own insecurities, their own problems. While you are spending hours wondering what they think of you, they may be spending their own hours wondering what everyone thinks of them. This is one of the illusions approval creates. It makes you believe that you are constantly being watched. You imagine that every mistake will be remembered. Every failure will become your identity. Every unusual decision will become a source of judgment. But most people are far more occupied with their own lives than you realize. The world is not watching you as closely as your fear tells you. And this realization can be liberating. You are allowed to make mistakes. You are allowed to change direction. You are allowed to disappoint someone. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to become different. You are allowed to stop performing. This does not mean becoming selfish or careless. It means understanding that there is a difference between considering other people's feelings and surrendering your entire identity to their expectations. You can listen without obeying. You can respect without submitting. You can love without becoming someone else. You can care about someone's opinion without allowing it to become your command. That distinction is essential, because sometimes we confuse being a good person with being an agreeable person. But these are not the same. A good person may say no. A good person may establish boundaries. A good person may disappoint you. A good person may choose a path you do not understand. A good person may refuse to participate in something that violates their values. Being kind does not require becoming available to everyone. Being compassionate does not require sacrificing your future. Being respectful does not require abandoning your truth. And when you understand this, you begin taking back small pieces of your life. You start asking yourself what you actually believe, not what your family expects, not what your friends prefer, not what social media celebrates, not what society considers impressive. What do you believe? What matters to you? What kind of life feels meaningful when nobody is watching? These questions can be difficult because you may discover that some of your goals were never truly yours. Perhaps you wanted success because you wanted to prove someone wrong. Perhaps you wanted money because you wanted to feel superior. Perhaps you wanted attention because you wanted to feel worthy. Perhaps you wanted a particular relationship because you wanted others to see you as desirable. Perhaps you wanted a certain lifestyle because you believed it would finally make people respect you. There is nothing inherently wrong with any of these desires. But you must ask what exists underneath them. Because achievement does not automatically heal insecurity. Recognition does not automatically create self-worth. Attention does not automatically create belonging. Money does not automatically create peace. Sometimes you can get exactly what you thought you wanted and still feel empty. And that emptiness can be a message. It may be telling you that the goal was never connected to your deeper self. You were climbing a ladder that was leaning against someone else's idea of success. You reached higher and higher. But you never stopped to ask whether the ladder was against the right wall. This is why living for approval can be so dangerous. It can make you extremely successful at living the wrong life. You can become highly disciplined and still be moving in the wrong direction. You can become admired and still feel unknown. You can become successful and still feel disconnected from yourself. You can achieve everything people told you to want and still wonder why you are not satisfied. The deeper question is not simply, how successful can I become? It is, who am I becoming through the life I am building? That question changes the entire journey, because success without identity can become another form of emptiness. You need to know why you are doing what you are doing. If you work hard, know why. If you pursue education, know why. If you build a business, know why. If you exercise, know why. If you leave a relationship, know why. If you stay, know why. If you change, know why. When your reasons come from within, you become much harder to manipulate from outside. Someone can criticize your decision, but you know why you made it. Someone can question your path, but you know why you chose it. Someone can laugh at your dream, but you know why it matters. Someone can fail to understand your journey, but you do not need their understanding to continue. This is where inner authority begins. You stop asking everyone else to confirm what you already know inside. You become willing to stand alone for a moment. And standing alone can be frightening. Human beings are deeply influenced by belonging. We fear exclusion. We fear rejection. We fear being misunderstood. We fear being different. But sometimes becoming yourself requires surviving the discomfort of being misunderstood. You may need to walk a path that your friends do not understand. You may need to make decisions your family questions. You may need to leave environments where everyone expects the old version of you to remain. You may need to stop participating in conversations that no longer represent who you are. And people may say, you have changed. Perhaps you have. Maybe that is the point. Growth changes you. Healing changes you. Self-respect changes you. Awareness changes you. You cannot become a new person while constantly protecting the expectations that belonged to your old identity. Sometimes people love the version of you that is convenient for them, the version that always says yes, the version that never challenges them, the version that is always available, the version that accepts whatever they give, the version that never grows beyond the role they assigned you. When you begin changing, they may feel uncomfortable, not necessarily because you are doing something wrong, but because your growth changes the relationship. You are no longer playing the same role. And this is where courage becomes necessary. You must decide whether you want to remain familiar or become authentic. Familiarity offers comfort. Authenticity offers freedom. But freedom often begins with discomfort. You may feel guilty when you first start choosing yourself. You may wonder whether you are becoming selfish. You may feel the urge to explain every decision. You may want everyone to understand that you still care. But eventually, you realize that you do not need to prove your heart to everyone. Your life can communicate your intentions. You can be kind while being firm. You can love people while choosing yourself. You can respect others while refusing to live according to their expectations. This is not rebellion. It is rebellion. It is differentiation. It is the process of becoming psychologically distinct from the expectations surrounding you. You begin recognizing which thoughts are truly yours and which ones were inherited. You may have inherited beliefs about success, beliefs about money, beliefs about relationships, beliefs about masculinity or femininity, beliefs about failure, beliefs about what a respectable life should look like, beliefs about what you should become by a certain age. But inherited beliefs are not automatically truths. They should be examined. You must ask, do I believe this because it is true for me, or because I was taught to believe it? That question can open an entirely different world. Maybe you discover that you do not need the life you were told to want. Maybe your definition of success is different. Maybe you want simplicity instead of status. Maybe you want freedom instead of recognition. Maybe you want meaningful work instead of impressive work. Maybe you want peace instead of constant competition. Maybe you want depth instead of popularity. There is no universal blueprint for a meaningful life. The danger begins when you allow society to choose your definition of meaning without questioning it. You can spend years climbing toward an image of success that was never connected to your soul. And the world may applaud you while you quietly disappear. This is why "do it for you" is not merely a motivational phrase. It is a psychological challenge. It asks you to become honest. What are you doing because you truly value it? What are you doing because you want someone to notice? What are you doing because you are afraid of being judged? What are you doing because you were told you should? What are you doing because you want to prove that you are enough? The answers may not be comfortable, but discomfort can be useful, because awareness is the beginning of choice. Once you see the pattern, you can change it. You can begin doing certain things without announcing them. Work without posting. Improve without telling everyone. Exercise without seeking praise. Study without needing recognition. Duck weight without asking whether people approve. Heal without turning your healing into a performance. Build quietly. Let your private discipline become stronger than your public image. There is something powerful about doing meaningful work when nobody is watching, because then you are no longer performing. You are practicing. You are building a relationship with yourself. You are telling yourself, "I will keep my promises even when nobody rewards me." That sentence creates a different kind of confidence, the confidence that comes from self-trust. When you know you can rely on yourself, external approval becomes less necessary. You still appreciate praise, but you do not depend upon it. You still enjoy recognition, but you do not need it to continue. You still listen to criticism, but you do not allow it to define you. You still care about people, but you no longer disappear inside their expectations. This is what it means to live from within. Your decisions begin emerging from your values rather than your fear. And fear will always have something to say. What if they laugh? What if you fail? What if they leave? What if nobody understands? What if you are wrong? But you can listen to fear without allowing it to become the author of your life. You can say, perhaps they will judge me, and continue. Perhaps I will fail, and continue. Perhaps someone will disagree, and continue, because the goal is not to eliminate fear. The goal is to stop allowing fear to make every decision. You may never reach a point where nobody's opinion affects you. That is not the goal. You are human. You will care. You will sometimes doubt yourself. You will sometimes want reassurance. The goal is to develop an inner foundation strong enough that external opinions cannot completely overturn you. You can bend without breaking. You can listen without surrendering. You can change without losing yourself. You can love without becoming dependent. You can walk alone without believing you have been abandoned. And eventually, you begin to experience a strange kind of freedom. You no longer need to announce every victory. You no longer need to defend every decision. You no longer need to convince everyone that you are becoming better. You simply become better. Not for applause. Not for recognition. Not to make someone regret losing you. Not to prove your enemies wrong. Not to make your family proud. Not to impress strangers. But because there is something inside you that wants to grow. That desire is quieter than ambition driven by ego. But it is deeper. It does not disappear when nobody is watching. It does not require an audience. It does not depend on comparison. It simply asks you to become more honest, more disciplined, more courageous, more conscious, more aligned with the person you know you can become. And when you begin living that way, something changes in the relationship you have with your own life. You stop asking, will they approve? And begin asking, will I respect myself if I choose this? You stop asking, will they understand? And begin asking, does this align with who I am becoming? You stop asking, will they applaud? And begin asking, is this worth doing even if nobody ever sees it? And that question can lead you toward a life that finally feels like your own. Because the deepest form of freedom may not be having everyone approve of you. It may be reaching the point where you no longer need their approval to keep becoming who you were meant to become. There is a difference between the life you are expected to live and the life that quietly calls to you from within. For many people, this difference remains hidden for years because they become so accustomed to following expectations that they stop asking themselves what they actually want. They follow the path placed in front of them. They choose what appears respectable. They pursue what receives approval. They measure themselves against the achievements of others. And eventually, they may reach a place where everything looks right from the outside, while something inside feels strangely empty. This emptiness is not always a sign that you have failed. Sometimes it is a sign that you have succeeded at becoming someone you were never meant to be. You can have the career people admire. You can have the relationship people envy. You can have the possessions people desire. You can have the social status people respect. And still wake up with the quiet feeling that something is missing. The missing thing may not be another achievement. It may be yourself. There is a deeper question beneath every goal. why do I want this? Not the socially acceptable answer. Not the answer that sounds impressive. Not the answer that will make other people proud. The honest answer, why do you want it? Perhaps you want money because you want freedom. Perhaps you want success because you want security. Perhaps you want recognition because you want to feel seen. Perhaps you want a relationship because you want connection. Perhaps you want power because you have spent years feeling powerless. Perhaps you want beauty because you fear rejection. Perhaps you want achievement because you secretly believe that achievement will finally prove that you are enough. The goal itself may not be the real desire. It may only be the symbol of something deeper. This is why discovering what you truly want requires more than making a list of goals. You must examine the emotional meaning behind those goals. You must become curious about yourself, and curiosity is often more valuable than judgment. Instead of saying, I should want this, ask, do I actually want this? Instead of saying, everyone else is doing it, ask, would I choose this if nobody else could see me? Instead of saying, this is what successful people do, ask, does this create the kind of life I actually want to experience? These questions can expose illusions, because sometimes we chase goals not because they bring meaning, but because they create an identity we believe will make us valuable. We want to be the successful one, the attractive one, the intelligent one, the respected one, the powerful one, the person who has everything together. But identity built entirely around external achievements is fragile. If the achievement disappears, the identity begins to collapse. If the job disappears, who are you? If the relationship ends, who are you? If the praise stops, who are you? If people stop admiring you, who are you? These questions can be uncomfortable because they force you to look beyond the roles you have been playing. You are not merely your job. You are not merely your relationship. You are not merely your achievements. You are not merely the opinion others have formed about you. There is something deeper beneath these identities. And discovering what you truly want often requires meeting that deeper part of yourself. This is not always easy, because when you stop listening to external expectations, you may discover that you have forgotten how to listen to your own voice. You may sit alone and realize you do not know what you want. You know what your parents want. You know what your friends think is best. You know what society considers successful. You know what social media tells you to desire. But what do you want? The silence that follows this question can be frightening. Do not rush to fill it. Stay with it. Let yourself discover slowly. Sometimes your authentic desires have been buried beneath years of conditioning. Perhaps you were taught that certain careers are prestigious and others are worthless. Perhaps you were taught that success means wealth. Perhaps you were taught that happiness means marriage. Perhaps you were taught that strength means never showing vulnerability. Perhaps you were taught that failure is shameful. Perhaps you were taught that your worth depends on productivity. These beliefs may have become so familiar that you mistake them for your own thoughts. But familiarity is not truth. You must examine the beliefs you inherited. Some will remain, others will fall away. And when they fall away, you may experience uncertainty. That uncertainty is not necessarily a problem. It can be the beginning of freedom. Because before you build a life that belongs to you, You may have to dismantle some of the ideas that were handed to you. This can feel like losing direction. But sometimes, losing an inherited direction is the first step toward discovering your own. Imagine standing at a crossroads. One road is clearly marked. It is the road everyone recognizes. People have traveled it before. There are instructions. There are expectations. There is approval waiting at the destination. The other road is less certain. It may not have a clear name. There may be no guarantee that people will understand why you chose it. But something inside you keeps looking toward it. You cannot explain exactly why. You simply know that the familiar road does not feel like yours anymore. This is where courage becomes important, because authenticity often requires uncertainty. You may not know exactly what you want at first. You may only know what you no longer want. That is still valuable. Knowing what drains you is information. Knowing what feels false is information. Knowing what makes you feel disconnected is information. Knowing what repeatedly violates your values is information. You do not need a perfect 5-year plan to begin becoming more authentic. Sometimes the first step is simply stopping what you know is wrong for you. Then listening. Pay attention to the moments when you feel most alive, not merely excited. Alive, there is a difference. Excitement can come from novelty. Approval can create excitement. Competition can create excitement. Ego can create excitement. But aliveness often feels quieter. It may appear when you are deeply focused on something meaningful. When time disappears, when you create something, when you solve a difficult problem, when you help someone without needing recognition, when you learn something that genuinely fascinates you, when you are doing something that feels connected to your values. These moments contain clues. Your life leaves signals, but you must slow down enough to notice them. Modern life makes this difficult. You are constantly exposed to other people's achievements, other people's bodies, other people's relationships, other people's houses, other people's careers, other people's opinions, other people's definitions of happiness. And if you consume enough of this material without reflection, you can begin confusing exposure with aspiration. You see someone living a certain life and think, I should want that too. But do you? Or do you simply want the feeling you imagine that life would give you? Perhaps you do not want their business. You want freedom. Perhaps you do not want their popularity. You want recognition. Perhaps you do not want their relationship. You want intimacy. Perhaps you do not want their wealth. You want security. Understanding the deeper desire allows you to pursue the underlying need in a way that actually fits your personality and values. This is where self-awareness becomes practical. Suppose you believe you want fame. Ask why. Maybe you want to feel significant. Then ask whether fame is the only path to significance. Maybe you believe you want wealth. Ask why. Maybe you want freedom from financial anxiety. Then ask whether your current goals are actually creating freedom or simply creating more pressure. Maybe you believe you want a prestigious career. Ask why. Maybe you want your family to feel proud. Then ask whether their pride is worth sacrificing decades of your life. These questions are not meant to destroy ambition. They are meant to purify it. There is nothing wrong with wanting achievement. There is nothing wrong with wanting money. There is nothing wrong with wanting recognition. The question is whether these things are serving your values or replacing them. A healthy ambition can say, I want to become excellent because mastery matters to me. An unhealthy ambition may say, I must become excellent or I am worthless. The external behavior may look identical. The internal motivation is completely different. One creates growth, the other creates endless hunger. If you believe you must constantly achieve in order to be worthy, there will never be enough. You reach one goal, then immediately create another. You receive praise, then fear losing it. You become successful, then compare yourself with someone more successful. You achieve financial security, then become terrified of losing it. The finish line keeps moving because the real problem was never the goal. It was the belief underneath the goal. I am not enough yet. This belief can disguise itself as ambition, but no amount of achievement can permanently satisfy it. At some point, you must separate self-worth from achievement. You can want to improve without believing that your current self is worthless. You can desire more without hating what you already are. You can become ambitious without becoming obsessed with proving yourself. You can pursue excellence while remaining psychologically grounded. This is what it means to discover what you truly want. You begin wanting things because they are meaningful, rather than because they make you appear valuable. And that changes how you make decisions. You stop choosing purely based on status. You stop automatically saying yes to opportunities that look impressive. You stop measuring every decision according to how it will appear on social media. You start asking whether the opportunity fits the life you are actually trying to create. Because not every opportunity is meant for you. Something can be good and still be wrong for your life. A career can be prestigious and still make you miserable. A relationship can look perfect and still feel emotionally empty. A city can be exciting and still not feel like home. A goal can be impressive and still not matter to you. You are allowed to reject things that other people consider valuable. That is part of psychological independence. It does not mean rejecting everything society values. It means deciding consciously. You choose rather than automatically inherit. And sometimes choosing consciously means admitting that your desires have changed. What you wanted at 20 may not be what you want at 30. What you wanted before a painful experience may not be what you want afterward. Growth changes perception. As you become more aware, your definition of success may change. Maybe you once wanted a life that looked impressive. Now you want a life that feels peaceful. Maybe you once wanted hundreds of friends. Now you want a few relationships with depth. Maybe you once wanted constant excitement. Now you value stability. Maybe you once wanted to prove everyone wrong. Now you simply want to become someone you respect. This is not failure, it is development. The danger is staying loyal to an old dream, simply because you announced it publicly. You do not have to remain committed to a goal just because other people know about it. You are allowed to say, I no longer want this. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to admit that your previous definition of success was borrowed. The fear of judgment can make people continue down paths they have already outgrown. They think changing direction will make them look inconsistent. But remaining miserable simply to appear consistent is not strength. It is attachment to an image. Your life is more important than your image. And this is where doing something for yourself becomes deeply meaningful. When you discover what you truly want, you stop treating your life as a performance. You begin building quietly. You may no longer need everyone to understand. You may no longer need to explain why you chose a certain path. You may no longer need to defend your goals against every opinion. You become willing to work in silence. This can feel strange at first, especially if you have been conditioned to seek constant feedback. But there is strength in private commitment. You wake up and work because the work matters. You practice because you want mastery. You exercise because you respect your body. You study because you want understanding. You save because you value freedom. You create because something inside you needs expression. You heal because you want peace, not because someone is watching. Not because someone promised a reward. Not because you need to prove your worth, but because the action itself is aligned with the person you are becoming. This is intrinsic motivation. It comes from within. And when motivation comes from within, it becomes more stable. External rewards can disappear. Praise can disappear. Attention can disappear. People can leave. Circumstances can change. But meaning can remain. You may still struggle. You may still become tired. You may still doubt yourself. But you have a reason deeper than applause. That reason can carry you through periods when motivation is absent, because you are no longer doing something merely to be seen. You are doing it because it belongs to you. And there is another important part of this process. You must learn to distinguish your true desires from impulses. Not everything you want deserves to become a goal. Sometimes you want something because you are bored. Sometimes because you are jealous. Sometimes because someone else has it. Sometimes because you want to escape discomfort. Sometimes because your ego wants immediate gratification. True desire often survives reflection. An impulse demands immediately. A deeper desire remains meaningful after the excitement fades. This is why patience is part of self-discovery. Give your desires time. Prop them down. Think about them. Ask what they would require from you. Ask whether you still want them when you consider the cost. Ask whether you want the reality or only the fantasy. Because every dream has a price. You may want entrepreneurship. Are you willing to tolerate uncertainty? You may want fitness. Are you willing to train when motivation disappears? You may want creative freedom. Are you willing to endure periods when nobody notices your work? You may want emotional peace. Are you willing to stop returning to environments that create chaos? You may want independence. Are you willing to take responsibility for your decisions? Knowing what you truly want means being willing to accept what comes with it. Fantasy wants the reward. Maturity accepts the process. And once you understand that, your goals become more grounded. You stop chasing images. You start choosing experiences. You stop asking how impressive something will look. You start asking how meaningful it will feel. You stop asking whether everyone will approve. You start asking whether you will respect yourself for pursuing it. That is the beginning of a different life. A life where your decisions are not constantly dictated by comparison. A life where you can appreciate another person's success without feeling like your own life is failing. A life where you can celebrate someone else's achievements and still remain committed to your path. A life where someone else's timeline does not become your emergency. You realize that there is no universal schedule for becoming yourself. Some people discover their direction early. Others spend years exploring. Some change careers. Some start again. Some leave relationships. Some build slowly. Some take unconventional paths. The timing is not the point. The honesty is. Your responsibility is not to become what someone else became at your age. Your responsibility is to understand yourself deeply enough to know what deserves your energy. Because your attention is limited, your time is limited, your energy is limited. Every yes contains a no. When you say yes to one path, you are often saying no to another. This makes conscious choice essential. You cannot pursue every possibility. You cannot satisfy every person. You cannot become every version of yourself. At some point, you must choose. And choosing means accepting that some people may not understand. Some opportunities will pass. Some identities will disappear. Some dreams will be released. But this is not necessarily loss. It can be refinement. You are removing what is not yours, so that what is yours can become clearer. And perhaps one day you will look back and realize that the greatest change was not that you achieved everything you wanted. It was that you finally learned to distinguish what you wanted from what you were taught to want. You stopped living according to invisible expectations. You stopped confusing attention with love. You stopped confusing status with meaning. You stopped confusing busyness with progress. You stopped confusing approval with worth. And you began listening. Quietly, honestly, without an audience, without needing permission, without requiring everyone to understand. You began asking yourself what kind of life would make you proud, not because others admired it, but because you knew you had lived it according to your deepest values. And that question can remain with you as you move through every decision, every opportunity, every relationship, every failure, every beginning, every moment when the outside world tells you what you should become. And something inside you quietly asks you to listen to what you truly want. There is a particular kind of strength that develops when you continue moving forward without anyone watching. Most people underestimate how difficult it is to keep going when there is no applause. When nobody notices the early mornings, nobody sees the sacrifices. Nobody knows how many times you questioned yourself. Nobody celebrates the small improvements. Nobody tells you that you are doing well. In those moments, you discover whether you are truly committed or simply motivated by recognition. Because it is easy to work hard when people are watching. It is easy to stay disciplined when someone expects something from you. It is easy to perform when there is an audience. But what happens when the audience disappears? What happens when nobody asks whether you completed the task? What happens when nobody cares whether you wake up early? What happens when nobody knows that you resisted an old habit? What happens when your progress is invisible? This is where your relationship with yourself becomes more important than your relationship with recognition. You begin to understand that some of the most important transformations in life happen quietly. A person becomes stronger in private. A person becomes disciplined in private. A person heals in private. A person changes their habits in private. A person learns to control their emotions in private. A person decides to stop returning to what hurts them in private. The world may eventually notice the result, but it will rarely see the process that created it. And perhaps that is why so many people quit too early. They expect visible rewards for invisible effort. They expect immediate confirmation that they are on the right path. They want someone to tell them that the sacrifice is worth it. But life does not always provide that reassurance. Sometimes you must continue before you have evidence. Sometimes you must believe in a possibility before anyone else can see it. Sometimes you must work for months or years while your external circumstances appear unchanged. This is where doing it for yourself becomes more than a motivational idea. It becomes a test of inner commitment. If you only work when people praise you, then your motivation belongs to them. If you only continue when people believe in you, then your direction belongs to them. If you only improve when someone is watching, then your discipline belongs to the audience. But when you continue without recognition, something inside you begins to change. You become your own witness. You know what you did. You know what you resisted. You know how difficult the day was. You know how many times you wanted to quit. You know that you still showed up. That knowledge creates a form of confidence that applause cannot provide, because applause tells you that others noticed. Self-trust tells you that you can rely on yourself. And the second is far more valuable. Imagine making a promise to yourself. You say that you will work on something every day. The first day feels exciting. The second day feels manageable. The third day becomes less exciting. Then life becomes busy. Your mood changes. You become tired. Nobody asks whether you did it. There is no punishment for quitting. There is no audience waiting to judge you. This is the moment that matters, not because the task itself is extraordinary, but because you are deciding what your word means to you. If you repeatedly make promises to yourself and break them, something subtle happens. You begin losing trust in yourself. You tell yourself that you will change, but a part of you does not believe you. You say you will stop, but a part of you expects you to return. You say you will begin, but a part of you expects another excuse. This is why private discipline matters. It rebuilds the relationship between your intention and your behavior. You say something, then you do it. Again, and again, and again. Eventually, your mind begins learning. When I decide something, I follow through. That belief is powerful, because confidence is not always the feeling that you can succeed. Sometimes confidence is the knowledge that you will continue, even when success takes longer than expected. You do not need certainty. You need commitment. You do not need constant motivation. You need a reason that survives the disappearance of motivation. And motivation will disappear. There will be mornings when you do not want to get up. There will be afternoons when you feel behind. There will be nights when you question your choices. There will be periods when your progress seems invisible. There will be moments when someone else appears to be moving faster. This is where comparison becomes dangerous. You look at another person's visible result while knowing nothing about their invisible process. You see the success. You do not see the years. You see the confidence. You do not see the failures. You see the finished product. You do not see the unfinished attempts. You see the applause. You do not see the loneliness. And then you compare your beginning to someone else's chapter that took years to write. This can make you believe that you are failing when you are simply developing. Growth often looks unimpressive before it becomes undeniable. A seed does not look like a tree. A beginner does not look like an expert. A person healing does not always look healed. A person rebuilding their life may appear lost before they become stable. Do not mistake invisibility for inactivity. Something can be changing, even when the evidence is not yet visible. Think about the roots of a tree. For a long time, much of the growth happens underground. If you judged the tree only by what you could see above the surface, you might believe nothing is happening. But beneath the ground, roots are expanding. Strength is developing. The foundation is becoming deeper. Your life can work the same way. You may be developing discipline before you see results. You may be developing emotional maturity before your relationships improve. You may be developing knowledge before your opportunities appear. You may be developing confidence before anyone notices a difference. You may be becoming someone new before your circumstances have had time to reflect it. This is why patience matters. Not passive patience, active patience, the patience to keep doing what matters while waiting for the result. That is difficult because modern culture trains you to expect immediate feedback. Post something and watch the numbers. Document something and watch the reactions. Work and expect a reward. Exercise and expect immediate transformation. Learn and expect instant mastery. But meaningful development rarely works that way. The deeper the change, the longer it often takes. And the longer it takes, the more important your internal reason becomes. If you are doing something only for recognition, the absence of recognition will eventually destroy your motivation. But if you are doing it because it matters to you, you can continue even when nobody notices. This is why private goals can be so powerful. You do not need to announce everything. You do not need to tell everyone what you are planning. You do not need to create an identity around what you intend to accomplish. Sometimes talking about the goal can create the illusion that you have already made progress. You tell people what you are going to do. They respond positively. They congratulate you. You experience a small emotional reward. And suddenly your mind receives some of the satisfaction it was supposed to receive from actually doing the work. The goal feels closer than it really is. This is why quiet action can be valuable. Instead of announcing every transformation, practice it. Instead of explaining your discipline, demonstrate it. Instead of telling people that you are changing, change. Instead of promising that you will become different, begin behaving differently. Let the evidence accumulate. You do not need to convince anyone. You need to convince yourself through action. And this is where the idea of do it for you becomes deeply connected to discipline. You do not exercise only because someone will notice your body. You exercise because you want to inhabit a stronger body. You do not study only because someone will praise your intelligence. You study because you want to understand. You do not work only because someone will reward you. You work because the skill matters to you. You do not heal because someone will admire your strength. You heal because you want to live without being controlled by old wounds. The reason becomes internal. And internal reasons are harder to take away. Someone can stop praising you. They cannot stop the meaning you have chosen. Someone can criticize your progress. They cannot decide whether your effort matters to you. Someone can leave. They cannot take away the skills you built. Someone can misunderstand your path. They cannot live your life for you. This is psychological independence. You stop outsourcing the meaning of your actions. You decide what matters. You decide what deserves your energy. You decide what kind of person you want to become. And then you practice becoming that person, whether anyone is watching or not. There will still be days when you fail. You will miss a day. You will miss a day. You will make a mistake. You will lose focus. You will return to an old habit. You will become discouraged. Do not turn one failure into an identity. A mistake is an event. It does not have to become a definition. The important question is not whether you ever fall. It is what you do after falling. Can you return? Can you begin again? Can you learn? Can you adjust? Can you continue without turning shame into another reason to quit? This is another reason to do it for yourself. When your motivation comes from proving something to other people, failure can feel humiliating. You imagine that everyone is watching. You imagine that everyone now knows you failed. You feel the need to hide, but when the journey belongs to you, failure becomes information. You ask, what went wrong? What can I change? What did I learn? What will I do differently next time? The ego wants to protect the image. Growth wants to improve the person. These are not always the same thing. Sometimes protecting your image means refusing to admit failure. Sometimes growth means admitting that your strategy was wrong. Sometimes you need to start over. Sometimes you need to slow down. Sometimes you need to ask for help. Sometimes you need to accept that your original goal was not what you truly wanted. None of this makes you weak, it makes you conscious. And consciousness requires honesty. You cannot build a life for yourself while constantly lying to yourself about what is working. If something is not working, look at it. If a goal no longer matters, examine it. If a relationship drains you, acknowledge it. If a habit controls you, admit it. If you are exhausted because you are trying to impress everyone, recognize it. The truth may be uncomfortable, but truth gives you something approval cannot give you. Directs. Once you know what is real, you can choose. And choice is where personal power begins. There is also a deeper reason why continuing without an audience matters. It teaches you that your worth does not depend on visibility. Not everything valuable has to be seen. Some of the most important things in life happen where there is no audience. A private act of courage, a difficult decision, a moment of restraint, a silent apology, a habit you finally break, a boundary you finally enforce, a temptation you finally resist, a morning when you get up, despite feeling exhausted, a night when you choose not to return to what you know will hurt you. Nobody may ever know, but you will. And sometimes that is enough. Because the person you spend the most time with is yourself. You cannot escape your own awareness. You may fool other people. You may create an impressive image. You may convince the world that everything is fine. But somewhere inside, you know whether you are living according to your values. That internal knowledge matters. You want to be able to look at yourself honestly. Not perfectly, honestly. You want to know that you are trying. You want to know that when you say something matters, your behavior reflects it. You want to know that you are not abandoning yourself simply because nobody is watching. This creates dignity. And dignity is quieter than confidence. It does not need to be announced. It comes from alignment. Your values say one thing. Your actions say the same thing. You become internally consistent. That consistency creates stability, and stability makes you less dependent on external approval. When people praise you, you can appreciate it. When they criticize you, you can examine it. When they ignore you, you can continue. When they misunderstand you, you can explain, if necessary, or remain silent, if explanation serves no purpose. When they leave, you can grieve without losing your identity, because your center is no longer outside you. You have built something within. This does not happen overnight. It is built through repetition, one private decision at a time. One promise kept, one boundary maintained, one uncomfortable action completed, one distraction rejected, one old pattern interrupted. One day when you choose your future instead of your immediate comfort, then another day, then another. Eventually, the person you were trying to become starts appearing naturally in your behavior. You no longer have to constantly remind yourself. You simply act differently. The disciplined person does not negotiate with every impulse. The emotionally mature person does not need to win every argument. The confident person does not need to prove everything. The self-respecting person does not chase every person who withdraws. The focused person does not need everyone to understand their priorities. These qualities become habits, and habits become identity. This is why you should not underestimate small actions. A small action repeated long enough becomes a pattern. A pattern repeated long enough becomes a character. And character eventually shapes a life. You may think that one day will not matter. One workout, one page, 1 hour of study, one difficult conversation, one decision to walk away, one moment of emotional control. But your identity is being built through these moments. You are constantly voting for the person you are becoming. Every action is a vote. Every choice is a vote. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you vote for one version of yourself. Every time you choose courage over avoidance, you vote for another. Every time you choose self-respect over approval, you strengthen something within. The world may not notice these votes, but you will eventually see the result. And when the result finally becomes visible, people may call it sudden. They may say you changed overnight. They may say you became lucky. They may say you suddenly became confident. They may say everything finally worked out. They will see the tree. They will not see the roots. They will see the transformation. They will not see the nights you almost quit. They will see the confidence. They will not see the uncertainty. They will see the result. They will not see the thousands of private decisions that created it. And you do not need them to see. That is the point. You were never building for their eyes. You were building for your life. You were becoming stronger for the person you would eventually have to live with. You were learning for your own mind. You were healing for your own peace. You were working for your own future. You were becoming disciplined because you wanted to trust yourself. You're becoming courageous because you were tired of living according to fear. You were becoming better because you knew there was more within you. And when nobody is watching, the question becomes very simple. Will you still do it? Will you still get up? Will you still practice? Will you still continue? Will you still choose the harder path? When there is no applause waiting, will you still honor the promise you made to yourself when nobody would know if you broke it? Because that is where the deepest transformation begins. Not in the moment when everyone finally believes in you, but in the moment when you decide that you can continue even before they do. Not when the world recognizes your value, but when you stop requiring the world to confirm it. Not when the results become visible, but when you become committed to the process while the results are still hidden. Not when people begin asking how you did it, but during all those quiet moments when nobody was asking anything from you and you chose to keep becoming the person you wanted to be. That is where your real work happens. That is where your relationship with yourself is formed. That is where you discover whether your dream belongs to you. And that is where you learn to keep moving, even when the world remains silent, and the only voice telling you to continue is the one inside you that refuses to give up. There comes a moment when you realize that the life you want will require you to choose your future over your immediate comfort. This is one of the most difficult choices a person can make, because comfort speaks loudly in the present, while the future speaks quietly from a distance. Comfort says, "Stay here, do it tomorrow. You deserve a break. You can start next week. You have plenty of time. Why make yourself uncomfortable?" And sometimes those statements are reasonable. Rest is necessary. Recovery matters. You do not need to turn your entire existence into a battle against yourself. But there is a difference between genuine rest and permanent avoidance. There is a difference between taking a break and building your life around comfort. The future you want is often hidden behind actions that your present self does not feel like taking. You want confidence. But confidence requires you to face situations that make you uncomfortable. You want discipline, but discipline requires you to act when motivation disappears. You want financial freedom, but financial freedom may require years of restraint and patience. You want a strong body, but strength requires repeated effort. You want meaningful relationships, but meaningful relationships require vulnerability. You want peace, but peace may require you to walk away from familiar chaos. You want self-respect, but self-respect may require difficult decisions that disappoint other people. The future always asks something from the present, and the present often wants to pay as little as possible. This is where many people become trapped. They are not incapable of achieving what they want. They simply keep choosing what feels better now over what would make their lives better later. A few minutes of distraction becomes an evening. An evening becomes a habit. A habit becomes a lifestyle. A lifestyle becomes an identity, and eventually, a person wonders why their life has not changed. The answer may be uncomfortable. Nothing changed because the daily choices remained the same. You cannot repeatedly choose the present at the expense of the future, and then expect the future to look different. Every day contains a negotiation between immediate comfort and long-term meaning. You wake up and decide whether to get out of bed. You sit down and decide whether to focus or distract yourself. You become angry and decide whether to react or remain composed. You feel lonely and decide whether to return to someone who harms you or tolerate the discomfort of being alone. You receive money and decide whether to consume or build. You face a difficulty and decide whether to quit or adapt. These decisions may appear small, but a life is not usually changed by one enormous decision. It is changed through thousands of ordinary decisions. Your future is being created in moments that seem insignificant. This is why you should pay attention to what you repeatedly choose when nobody is forcing you. Because those choices reveal what you truly prioritize. You may say that you want freedom, but if you constantly trade your future freedom for immediate comfort, your behavior is telling another story. You may say that you want health, but if you consistently choose habits that undermine it, your actions are speaking. You may say that you want peace, but if you repeatedly return to unnecessary conflict, your behavior is revealing something deeper. You may say that you want growth, but if you avoid every situation that challenges you, growth remains an idea rather than a reality. There is nothing wrong with comfort. The problem is when comfort becomes your highest value. Comfort is useful as a place of recovery. It becomes dangerous when it becomes a place of residence. You were not designed to remain permanently comfortable. A certain amount of difficulty is necessary for development. A muscle grows through resistance. A skill develops through repetition. Confidence develops through confronting uncertainty. Emotional maturity develops through difficult experiences. Wisdom develops through reflection. Character develops through choices made under pressure. If you remove every challenge from your life, you may also remove many opportunities to discover what you are capable of. This does not mean you should intentionally make life miserable. It means you should stop assuming that discomfort is evidence that you are on the wrong path. Sometimes discomfort is simply the price of becoming stronger. Think about learning something new. At first, you feel incompetent. You make mistakes. You struggle. You become frustrated. You may wonder whether you are capable. If you interpret that discomfort as proof that you should stop, you never reach mastery. But if you stay with the process, something changes. What once felt difficult becomes familiar. What once required enormous effort becomes natural. The discomfort was not a sign that you were failing. It was part of learning. Life often works the same way. The first boundary feels uncomfortable. The first honest conversation feels uncomfortable. The first day of discipline feels uncomfortable. The first time you say no feels uncomfortable. The first time you choose your long-term goal over immediate pleasure feels uncomfortable. But discomfort can become evidence that you are practicing a new way of living. This is why you must learn to distinguish between pain that destroys you and discomfort that develops you. Not every difficult situation is valuable. Some situations should be left. Some relationships should end. Some environments are genuinely harmful. Choosing your future does not mean enduring everything. It means becoming conscious about what kind of discomfort serves your growth and what kind merely keeps you trapped. Sometimes your future requires you to leave. Sometimes it requires you to stay and work. Sometimes it requires patience. Sometimes it requires courage. Sometimes it requires saying no. Sometimes it requires saying yes. The point is not to choose difficulty for its own sake. The point is to stop choosing based solely on what feels easiest right now. Because the easiest decision today can create the hardest life tomorrow. And the difficult decision today can create the easiest life later. This is the paradox of discipline. Discipline creates temporary difficulty so that life can become more manageable in the future. You study now so that you have more opportunities later. You save now so that you have more freedom later. You exercise now so that your body can serve you later. You practice now so that your skill becomes valuable later. You establish boundaries now so that your relationships become healthier later. You say no now so that your future is not filled with commitments you never wanted. You sacrifice certain pleasures now because you are building something that matters more. This does not mean you should never enjoy the present. A life postponed entirely for the future is also a form of imbalance. You can enjoy today while still protecting tomorrow. The goal is not to become obsessed with the future. The goal is to remember that the future exists. You must live today, but you should not destroy tomorrow in order to make today slightly easier. There is wisdom in asking yourself, will the person I become thank me for this decision? That question can interrupt impulsive behavior. When you want to waste hours, ask, will tomorrow's version of me be grateful for this? When you want to return to a harmful relationship because you feel lonely, ask, will the future version of me respect this choice? When you want to quit because progress is slow, ask, will I be proud that I continued? When you want to spend money simply because you are emotional, ask, does this purchase serve the life I am building? You are creating a relationship between your present self and your future self. And the future self cannot speak to you directly. It cannot walk into the room and tell you what it needs. It can only exist as a possibility. You must choose whether to protect that possibility. This is why imagination can be powerful. Imagine yourself 5 years from now, not as a fantasy, as a consequence. If you continue exactly as you are, where might your current habits lead? If you keep avoiding difficult conversations, what happens to your relationships? If you keep spending without saving, what happens to your financial options? If you keep ignoring your health, what happens to your energy? If you keep seeking approval, what happens to your identity? If you keep delaying your goals, what happens to your confidence? This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to make the invisible visible. Every habit has a direction. Every repeated choice points somewhere. You may not notice the movement today, but direction matters more than speed. A person walking slowly in the right direction can eventually reach a meaningful destination. A person moving quickly in the wrong direction may simply become lost faster. This is why your daily choices deserve attention, not obsession. Attention. Ask yourself what direction you are moving. Are your habits supporting the person you want to become? Are your relationships supporting your values? Is your environment helping you grow? Are you spending your energy on what matters? Are you repeatedly trading long-term meaning for short-term relief? The answers do not need to be perfect. Awareness is enough to begin, then make one different decision. You do not need to transform your entire life in one day. Choose one area, one habit, one boundary, one commitment, one action. Make it small enough that you can repeat it, because consistency is more important than dramatic intensity. People often try to change everything at once. They create impossible routines. They make enormous promises. They become excited. Then exhaustion arrives. They fail to maintain the plan. Then they conclude that they lack discipline. But perhaps the problem was not their character. Perhaps the plan was unrealistic. Sustainable change often begins with something almost too simple to fail. Write a few pages, walk for a short time, save a small amount. Spend 10 focused minutes on the important task, say no once, put the phone away for a while. Go to sleep slightly earlier. Have one honest conversation. These actions seem small, but small actions can create evidence. Evidence creates confidence. Confidence creates consistency. Consistency creates identity. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior shapes your future. The future is not some distant event waiting to happen. It is being constructed through your current patterns. You are meeting your future self every day through your choices. Every time you choose discipline, you are sending something forward. Every time you choose avoidance, you are also sending something forward. Every time you choose courage, you strengthen a future version of yourself. Every time you choose immediate gratification at the expense of something meaningful, you make another kind of investment. This is why awareness of consequences is so powerful. You begin seeing beyond the moment. A temptation is no longer just a temptation. It becomes a question. What does this choice lead toward? Anger becomes a question. What happens if I react this way? Silence becomes a question. What happens if I avoid this conversation? Comfort becomes a question. What happens if I keep choosing this? Fear becomes a question. What happens if I let fear make this decision? The goal is not to eliminate emotion. It is to place emotion within a larger perspective. You can feel tired and still choose what matters. You can feel afraid and still act. You can feel uncomfortable and still continue. You can feel uncertain and still make a thoughtful decision. This is maturity. It is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to hold emotion without allowing it to control your entire direction. And sometimes, the greatest enemy of your future is not failure. It is distraction. Distraction does not always look harmful. Sometimes it looks like entertainment. Sometimes it looks like endless scrolling. Sometimes it looks like constant socializing. Sometimes it looks like researching forever without acting. Sometimes it looks like helping everyone else so you never have to face your own goals. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. You keep preparing because starting would expose you to judgment. You keep planning because action creates uncertainty. You keep waiting for the perfect moment. But the perfect moment rarely arrives. There will always be reasons to delay. You will be tired. You will be busy. You will be uncertain. You will have responsibilities. You will have doubts. Life will never become completely free of obstacles. At some point, you must learn to move with imperfect conditions. This is not recklessness. It is realism. You do not need perfect confidence before beginning. Confidence can come after action. You do not need perfect clarity before taking the first steps. Clarity often develops through movement. You do not need to know exactly how the entire journey will unfold. You only need to know what the next meaningful step is. That step may be small, but it matters. And once you take it, the next step becomes easier to see. This is how the future becomes real. Not through endless thinking, through action. You may discover that the future you imagined is not exactly what you expected. That is okay. The purpose of choosing your future is not to control every detail. It is to live intentionally. You are allowed to adjust. You are allowed to change direction. You are allowed to discover that your original goal was wrong. The important thing is that you are choosing consciously rather than drifting unconsciously. Drifting is easy. You simply follow whatever demands your attention. You respond to notifications. You react to other people's expectations. You follow the path of least resistance. You allow circumstances to decide. Then years pass. Intentional living is different. You decide what matters. You protect time for it. You accept the sacrifices required. You tolerate temporary discomfort. You keep going when motivation disappears. And you adjust when reality teaches you something new. This is what it means to take responsibility for your future. Not controlling everything, but controlling what is yours to control. Your choices, your habits, your attention, your effort, your boundaries, your response, your willingness to begin again. You cannot control whether everyone supports you. You cannot control whether circumstances are fair. You cannot control how quickly results arrive. You cannot control what other people choose, but you can decide what kind of person you will be within those circumstances. And that decision matters because the future you want may require a version of you that does not yet exist. You may need more patience, more discipline, more courage, more emotional stability, more knowledge, more self-respect, more honesty. And you develop these qualities by practicing them now. You do not become patient by waiting for life to become convenient. You become patient by practicing patience in inconvenience. You do not become courageous by waiting for fear to disappear. You become courageous by acting while fear is present. You do not become disciplined by waiting to feel motivated. You become disciplined by keeping commitments when motivation is absent. You do not become confident by waiting for everyone to approve. You become confident by learning to trust your own decisions. This is why your future self is not a stranger. Your future self is being built by your current behavior. Every day, you are either making that future easier or harder. You are either creating options or removing them. You are either strengthening your character or weakening it. You are either becoming more capable of handling life or more dependent on comfort. And nobody else can make these choices for you. They can encourage you. They can advise you. They can inspire you. They can love you. But they cannot live your life. At some point, the responsibility returns to you. And perhaps that is frightening, but it is also freeing, because if your life is partly shaped by your choices, then you have the ability to change its direction. You do not need to change everything today. You only need to stop betraying tomorrow for the sake of today. Choose one thing your future self would thank you for. Then do it. Not because it is easy, not because someone will praise you, not because everyone will understand, but because somewhere beyond the comfort of this moment is a version of your life that requires you to make a different choice now. A choice to wake up, a choice to begin, a choice to continue, a choice to save, a choice to learn, a choice to leave, a choice to forgive, a choice to become disciplined, a choice to stop running from what matters. And every time you make that choice, you are telling your future self that you were willing to sacrifice a little comfort so that something more meaningful could exist later. You are saying that your life is worth the effort. Your potential is worth the patience. Your peace is worth the boundary. Your dream is worth the discipline. Your future is worth choosing, even when the present is asking you to stay comfortable, stay distracted, stay familiar, stay exactly where you are. Because the person you want to become is waiting inside the decisions you are willing to make today. In those quiet moments when nobody can force you, nobody can reward you, and nobody can even know what you chose except you and the future you are slowly creating. There is a moment when you stop asking how other people see you and begin asking a much more difficult question. Do I respect the person I am becoming? This question reaches deeper than appearance, deeper than success, deeper than reputation, deeper than money, deeper than popularity. Because you can be admired by people and still feel disappointed in yourself. You can look confident while privately knowing that you are avoiding what you need to face. You can appear successful while breaking promises you repeatedly make to yourself. You can receive praise while carrying the quiet knowledge that you are not living according to your own values. One, and this is why becoming someone you respect is different from becoming someone everyone else respects. The world judges what it can see. You judge what you know. You know the decisions nobody witnessed. You know the promises you kept and the ones you abandoned. You know when you acted from courage and when you acted from fear. You know when you stayed silent because silence was wise, and when you stayed silent because you were afraid. You know when you helped someone from genuine compassion, and when you helped because you wanted approval. You know when you walked away because you respected yourself, and when you ran away because you were afraid of confrontation. There is a private relationship you have with yourself that nobody else can fully observe, and that relationship shapes the quality of your life. If you constantly betray your own values, something inside you becomes weaker. Not because someone punished you, not because the world rejected you, but because you know. You know when you promised yourself you would change and then return to the same behavior. You know when you said you would stop accepting disrespect and then accepted it again. You know when you said you would focus and then gave your attention away. You know when you said you would take care of yourself and then repeatedly ignored what you needed. Every broken promise leaves a small mark on self-trust. One broken promise may seem insignificant, but repeated betrayal of your own word changes how you see yourself. Eventually, you may begin saying, "I know myself," but what you really mean is, "I know that I cannot depend on myself." And that is a painful place to live, because confidence is not merely believing that you are capable. Confidence is also believing that you will stand beside yourself when life becomes difficult. It is knowing that when you say no, you mean no. When you make a commitment, you try to honor it. When you recognize a mistake, you correct it. When something violates your values, you are willing to confront it. When you fall, you return. When you fail, you learn. When you become lost, you are willing to begin again. This is how self-respect is built. Not through motivational words, through evidence. You need evidence that you can trust yourself. And evidence comes from action. You tell yourself you will wake up at a certain time. Then, you do it. You tell yourself you will stop wasting your evenings. Then you protect your time. You tell yourself you will work toward a meaningful goal. Then, you show up. You tell yourself you will stop chasing people who repeatedly reject you. Then you allow yourself to walk away. Each action becomes another piece of evidence. You are teaching your mind. My words have meaning. My decisions matter. I can depend on myself. And slowly your identity begins changing. You no longer need to constantly convince yourself that you are strong. You begin experiencing strength. There is a major difference between telling yourself that you are disciplined and behaving like a disciplined person. One is an idea, the other is identity. And identity is built through repetition. If you want to become someone you respect, stop focusing only on how you feel about yourself. Focus on how you behave when nobody is watching. How do you treat people when they cannot give you anything? How do you behave when you are angry? How do you respond when you are disappointed? What do you do when you fail? What do you do when you are bored? What do you do when you are tempted? What do you do when you have power over someone weaker than you? What do you do when you could lie and nobody would know? These moments reveal character. Character is not what you say about yourself. Character is what remains when there is no audience. You can tell the world that you are honest. But the real test is the moment when dishonesty would benefit you. You can tell the world that you are strong, but the real test is the moment when fear asks you to surrender. You can tell the world that you respect yourself, but the real test is the moment when loneliness tempts you to return to what you already know is wrong for you. You can tell the world that you are disciplined, but the real test is the moment when nobody would know if you quit. This is why private decisions matter so much. They shape the person you meet when you are alone. And eventually, you must become comfortable meeting yourself without distraction. Modern life gives you endless ways to avoid yourself. Noise, entertainment, social media, constant conversation, constant stimulation, constant information. You can remain busy every waking hour and never ask yourself whether you actually respect the direction of your life. But eventually, silence arrives. Perhaps late at night. Perhaps during a difficult period. Perhaps after a failure. Perhaps after losing something important. And in that silence, the distractions disappear. You are left with yourself, and the question becomes unavoidable. Am I living in a way that I can respect? This question does not demand perfection. It demands honesty. You will make mistakes. You will sometimes behave badly. You will lose patience. You will become afraid. You will make decisions you regret. You will sometimes choose comfort. You will sometimes disappoint yourself. The goal is not to become flawless. The goal is to become accountable. There is a difference between self-respect and perfectionism. Perfectionism says, I must never fail. Self-respect says, when I fail, I will take responsibility and learn. Perfectionism makes mistakes into evidence that you are worthless. Self-respect makes mistakes into information. Perfectionism hides weakness. Self-respect examines weakness. Perfectionism protects an image. Self-respect protects the truth. And truth is essential because you cannot become someone you respect while constantly pretending to be someone you are not. You must be willing to see your own shadow. The parts of yourself you do not like, your jealousy, your insecurity, your anger, your need for approval, your avoidance, your resentment, your fear, your selfishness, your tendency to blame others, your desire to control. These things do not become weaker simply because you refuse to acknowledge them. What you refuse to see can influence you from the background. But when you become conscious of your patterns, you gain the possibility of choosing differently. You can say, yes, I become defensive when criticized. Then you can practice listening. Yes, I seek approval. Then you can practice making decisions without applause. Yes, I avoid difficult conversations. Then you can practice honesty. Yes, I become attached to people who do not treat me well. Then you can practice boundaries. Awareness creates responsibility. Responsibility creates choice. Choice creates change. And change creates a new relationship with yourself. You begin respecting yourself, not because you have eliminated every weakness, but because you are no longer running from your weaknesses. You are facing them. That requires courage. And courage is not always dramatic. Sometimes, courage is waking up and doing what you promised. Sometimes, courage is admitting you were wrong. Sometimes courage is apologizing. Sometimes courage is saying no. Sometimes courage is leaving. Sometimes courage is staying and doing the difficult work. Sometimes courage is asking for help. Sometimes courage is admitting that you are tired. Sometimes courage is refusing to pretend that everything is fine. There is strength in honesty. A person who knows themselves does not need to constantly perform strength. They can admit fear without becoming controlled by it. They can admit uncertainty without collapsing. They can admit weakness without turning weakness into identity. They can say, I do not know. I made a mistake. I need help. I was wrong. I am afraid. And still continue. This is a deeper kind of confidence. It is not built on superiority. It is built on self-acceptance and responsibility. You do not have to become better than everyone else. You need to become more aligned with your own values. This is important because comparison can corrupt self-respect. You look at another person and decide that they are ahead. They have more money, more followers, a better body, a better career, a better relationship, a bigger house, a more exciting life. And suddenly you believe that you are behind. But behind whom? According to what standard? According to whose definition of success? If you spend your entire life comparing yourself to people around you, you may never discover your own measure of progress. Your goal is not to become the most impressive person in the room. Your goal is to become someone you can trust in the room. Someone who does not abandon their values for acceptance. Someone who does not betray themselves for attention. Someone who does not change their personality for approval. Someone who does not sacrifice their future for temporary comfort. Someone who can look at their own reflection without needing to invent a story about who they are. This does not mean becoming rigid. Self-respect does not mean refusing to change. In fact, the opposite may be true. A person who respects themselves should be willing to change what is no longer serving them. You are allowed to outgrow your habits. You are allowed to outgrow relationships. You are allowed to outgrow beliefs. You are allowed to change your goals. You are allowed to become more disciplined. You are allowed to become softer. You are allowed to become stronger. You are allowed to admit that the person you were yesterday is not the person you want to be tomorrow. Growth requires movement. But movement without direction can become another form of escape. You must know what values guide your transformation. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? Not, what do I want to have? Not, How successful do I want to look? Not, how many people do I want to impress? Ask, what kind of person do I want to become? Do you want to be reliable, courageous, patient, disciplined, compassionate, honest, focused, independent, calm, strong, generous, wise? Then begin practicing those qualities. If you want to become disciplined, create opportunities to practice discipline. If you want to become courageous, stop avoiding every uncomfortable situation. If you want to become honest, tell the truth even when it costs you something. If you want to become patient, stop demanding that everything happen immediately. If you want to become emotionally mature, learn to pause before reacting. If you want to become independent, learn to make decisions without constantly seeking permission. You do not become a quality by declaring it. You become it by practicing it. And practice requires repetition. One courageous decision does not make you permanently courageous. One disciplined morning does not make you permanently disciplined. One honest conversation does not make you permanently honest. You continue practicing. That is why becoming someone you respect is a lifelong process. You are not building a finished identity. You are building a relationship with yourself that evolves. Some days you will be proud of yourself. Some days you will not. The important thing is that you remain present. Do not disappear from your own life when you disappoint yourself. That is when you need yourself most. When you fail, do not immediately attack yourself. Ask what happened. Was the goal unrealistic? Was the environment wrong? Did you lack preparation? Were you avoiding something? Did you become overwhelmed? What can you change? This approach turns failure into responsibility rather than shame. And responsibility gives you power, because shame says, I am the problem. Responsibility says, there is something I can do differently. That distinction can change everything. If you believe you are permanently broken, you stop trying. If you believe your behavior can change, you have a path forward. You may have made mistakes, but mistakes are not destiny. You may have wasted time, but wasted time does not mean the rest of your life must be wasted. You may have chosen badly, but you can choose differently. You may have allowed people to disrespect you, but you can begin establishing boundaries. You may have neglected yourself, but you can begin returning to yourself. The future version of you does not require a perfect history. It requires an honest present. And sometimes, becoming someone you respect begins with one simple decision. Stop doing something you know is beneath your values. You may not know exactly what you should do yet, but you know what you should stop. Stop lying to yourself. Stop making promises you never intend to keep. Stop chasing people who repeatedly show you that they do not value you. Stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop sacrificing your peace to maintain appearances. Stop pretending that your destructive habits are harmless. Stop calling avoidance patience. Stop calling fear logic. Stop calling approval love. Stop calling exhaustion ambition. Stop calling self-abandonment kindness. These distinctions matter because language can hide patterns. You can give a beautiful name to something that is quietly destroying your self-respect. Sometimes you need to call it what it is. If you are afraid to say no, say that you are afraid. If you are seeking approval, admit that you are seeking approval. If you are procrastinating, stop calling it preparation. If you are avoiding responsibility, stop calling it bad luck. Honesty removes the disguise. And once the disguise is removed, you can work with reality. There is another dimension to becoming someone you respect, learning to keep your boundaries. A boundary is not a weapon. It is a statement of what you will and will not participate in. You do not need to threaten people. You do not need to punish them. You simply need to know your limits. When someone repeatedly violates your values, you must be willing to respond. Sometimes with conversation, sometimes with distance, sometimes with a complete departure. The ability to walk away can be part of self-respect. Not because everyone who disappoints you should be abandoned, but because you must know that you can survive without betraying yourself to keep someone else. This is especially difficult when you care deeply. Love can make people tolerate what they would never advise another person to tolerate. Loneliness can make people return to harmful situations. Fear can make people accept less than they deserve. But self-respect asks a difficult question. What am I teaching myself about my own value through what I continue to accept? Every repeated acceptance communicates something to yourself and sometimes to others. If you repeatedly accept disrespect, you may begin believing that disrespect is the price of connection. If you repeatedly abandon your needs, you may begin believing that your needs are unimportant. If you repeatedly ignore your intuition, you may stop trusting yourself. This is why boundaries are not merely about controlling other people. They are about rebuilding your relationship with yourself. You are telling yourself, my well-being matters, my values matter, my time matters, my peace matters, my future matters. And then your behavior must support those statements. Otherwise, they remain words. The person you respect is not the person who says all the right things. It is the person whose actions eventually become consistent with what they claim to believe. This is why you should focus less on appearing powerful and more on becoming dependable. Less on appearing confident and more on becoming courageous. Less on appearing successful and more on becoming capable. Less on appearing happy and more on becoming emotionally honest. Less on receiving respect and more on practicing self-respect. The external result may eventually follow. People often recognize what they consistently experience. When you become reliable, people notice. When you become calm, people notice. When you become disciplined, people notice. When you stop reacting to everything, people notice. When you stop chasing approval, people notice. But that should not be the reason. Let recognition be a consequence, not the objective. Your objective is alignment. The quiet knowledge that your life reflects your values. That when nobody is watching, you still try. That when nobody applauds, you still improve. That when nobody understands, you still remain honest with yourself. That when you fail, you return. That when you succeed, you remain grounded. That when you are criticized, you listen without collapsing. That when you are praised, you appreciate it without becoming dependent. That when you are alone, you do not feel the need to become someone else. And slowly, something begins to happen. You stop needing to ask whether you are enough, because you are no longer measuring your worth against every external reaction. You begin measuring yourself according to something deeper. Did I act according to my values? Did I keep my word? Did I tell the truth? Did I take responsibility?